Hello chess friends and welcome to your Out of Chess channel and welcome to an amazing game that I prepared for you today. It's Stockfish 15 against Leela C0 in the Morphy defense of the Ruy Lopez, and I'm not sure what to say about these games anymore. They're so beautiful, but they're also so brutal, and I really don't want to overuse the word immortal because we cannot really call every Stockfish 15 game as an immortal game, but I don't know how to call it. As I said, this game, especially in the Morphy defense, in the Ruy Lopez, in such a calm opening, will be such a brutal tactical game. And a couple of days ago we have seen a beautiful gameplay by Stockfish, where Stockfish played with the black pieces in the Richter Rouser attack and destroyed also Leela C0, and I thought this could be really the best gameplay by Stockfish 15 now. But now when I saw this game, I'm not sure even, as I said, which one is better, because every game now by Stockfish 15 is a pure beauty. It's such a dynamic game. So let's see now the game. Stockfish 15 against Leela C0 in the Morphy defense of the Ruy Lopez. So e4 was played by Stockfish. We have e5 by Leela C0, knight to f3, knight to c6, bishop to b5. The Ruy Lopez, the Spanish game, is on the board, and now the move a6, the Morphy defense. So bishop to a4, knight to f6, kingside castling. This was sort of an invitation by Stockfish 15 to go maybe into the open Ruy Lopez with the move knight takes e4, but the Leela C0 played now the move b5, bishop to b3, and now bishop to c5. And what I always liked now recently about the Stockfish versus Leela games is that they played natural, healthy openings that we can use in our own preparation at home. So they're not playing so many of this alley kind of defenses, maybe grub openings and maybe some other bad openings. They're playing, as I said, solid chess openings, and for instance this position has been played millions and millions of times. So as I said, many of these ideas I think you can use in your own games if you're maybe a Ruy Lopez player. So here in the continuation we have a4. This is the normal idea. We want to break this small hook sort of that Leela C0 has built here, of course using also the tension a little bit on the a file. So that's why bishop to b7 and also rook to b8 are normal ideas to get out of this tactical mess. So bishop to b7 was the line by Leela C0. c3 was played by Stockfish 15, again inviting maybe Leela to go into the open Ruy Lopez. But now if you take knight to e4, the problem is now you get queen to e2, and the problem is even if you take some ideas like knight to f2 are not working because you get simply d4. Look at this, two pieces are now hanging. If you take for instance here with the bishop takes f2, then you have to just step back. You just play king to h1. Many times now in the Ruy Lopez there are ideas to take out even the pawn on f2, giving even maybe two minor pieces for the rook, but now in this line it's not working. You get out of the mess. The bishop is hanging now, also the knight is hanging, so it's game over I think here for black. So as I said, after move c3 there's simply no time to take out immediately the pawn in e4. So that's why here first d6 and now rook to e1 finally played by Stockfish 15. So we have kingside castling, d4, breaking in the center, and this is what I really liked about this game, because the game is exploding immediately. So the game is really wild. That's I think also a little bit the downside about this move bishop to c7, bishop to c5, pardon me. Many times in the closed Ruy Lopez you're trying to play the move bishop to e7. You see now, okay, the bishop on c5 is active, but it becomes now also an object of white's attack. So white is getting an extra tempo against your bishop. So here we have bishop to b6, we have bishop to g5, h6, bishop to h4. So this line has been also played many times, and now comes the fun part. We have here e takes d4 and c takes d4. And okay, let's stop and evaluate a little bit the position, because it's very important now to notice what's going on the board. First of all, white has a dominant center. What I mean about this, of course, we have here from white's perspective two connected pawns, which are of course restricting the minor piece ability here. So the minor pieces of blacks are a little bit paralyzed, are a little bit out of game. But we have to say this is not a strong center, because this center can be attacked. This center is already attacked, and what black is hoping for to get out of this sort of positional struggle is to expose white here. Here basically black wants to make here white a move in the center, so either e5 or d5. Every move is I think good for black, because what white is hoping for, white wants to stay with these two connected pawns, because as I said they're restricting the black's ability to play. But as I said, now in the near future black is trying to play maybe moves as d5, fixing the center, or maybe g5, and then attack further the pawn on e4. So here the continuation comes to move g5, and as I said, if you retreat here to g3, then I think you get the rook to e8. That's the point about this not so strong center, we have to say it, because look at this, now the pawn is hanging on e4, and now okay, you have your fun with the move d5, but now it's not the strong center anymore. Now you have a weakness on e5. Now we can play even knight to a5, attacking the bishop, and in the near future black could hope maybe and build sort of a blockade around the square e5. So nothing special, I think, in this position for white. So let's go back. So after move g5, Stockfish noticed probably that it could have some problems here in the center of the board, so that's why Stockfish pulled off a really thick, brutal tactic, knight takes g5, and this became exploding, as I said, immediately. It's really wild. We're now already in move 14, and Stockfish has sacrificed already something. So here in the continuation, what to do? You have to accept the game now. Of course, h takes g5. We have bishop to g5, and here knight takes d4 was played by Leela c0, because e5 was of course the main threat, because as I said, the white has now the mobile center and could have some fun by pushing the pawn on e5. And I'm sure that many of you have maybe reached a similar position, not the same, and you were probably scared maybe to sacrifice the knight on g5. I'm sure you have reached many times in the Ruy Lopez, or maybe in the Italian game, you have reached a similar position. Sometimes these sacrifices are working. Please don't just retreat immediately. Please consider sometimes that there are maybe tactical possibilities. Don't retreat immediately. That's my point. Maybe it's time to retreat. Maybe this tactical shot is not working. But as I said, sometimes we get a little bit scared and then we just retreat, and then maybe we analyze the game at home, and we thought maybe with some engines that we had the opportunity to play maybe the best game of our life. So as I said, sometimes you should just really be sharp in chess and consider some really tactics. So here after bishop to g5, as we said, knight takes d4 was played by Leela c0. If you play bishop to d4, this was also an opportunity. I wanted to now show you how actually tactically rich this position is. We have still this pin, and in my opinion, when I first analyzed the game, the move bishop to d4 made more sense to me, because the bishop is coming into the game, and the bishop is a new defender here around the square f6. So as I said, in my opinion, without of course analyzing with some engines, it was a much better move. But this move is not so good, because you get bishop to d5, and the problem is now that this knight is also a little bit pinned. When you play with knight to d4, then you still have after bishop to d5 the ability to play the move c6. We'll come to that part in the later stage of our analysis. Now let's see this sequence. So after move bishop to d5, again I'm pointing out this line has not been played up, but I wanted to show you how wild really this position is. So here after move bishop to d5, black should probably take out the pawn on b2. Rook to a2 would be now sort of a move, and now bishop to e5, of course fixing the position on dark squares, because there's simply no good square. If you play bishop to d4, then there is this risk of bishop takes c6 and followed with queen takes d4. So you don't have good squares for the bishop. You have to play bishop to e5, but now the fun starts with f4. You have this mobile pawn center again. You're creating some dynamics. The bishop has to retreat to d4. Now after king to h1, maybe you have to play something like queen to d7, and look at this. It seems so that white should be better here, because of course bishop to c6 is going to happen, but actually, believe me or not, bishop to c6 would be here a huge mistake. Look how wild really this position is. If of course bishop to c6 and you play queen to d4, it seems so that basically black is lost, because you lose the knight. What should you do? But actually here you have this one, knight to e4. Black could be challenged maybe with the move bishop to h6, sort of a checkmate threat here, but now comes the stunner, knight to g3, and this is now really a wild line. I really wanted to show you this wasn't playing the game, but how brutal really this position can become. Knight to g3. The problem is now you have to react. If you play king to g1, then you have this one, knight to f5. You see the fork, this square is protecting, and now suddenly you're losing the bishop. So you have to play here h takes to g3, but now the queen comes into the game, queen to h3, king to g1, and now we take out here the bishop on h6. So now this should be a much better position for black, especially because black can defend with queen to g7 and has now a situation of 4 versus 1 pawn majority. And we have to say it also in this position, the bishop is much better because we have pawns on both sides. So in a potential fully endgame, this is completely winning for black. And there is also one other problem, of course, the disconnected rooks. Now in the near future, white will be challenged maybe with the move rook to e8. For instance, if white even tries rook to c2 to attack now here the position, rook to e8 is immediately an opportunity to again create some madness. So as I said, this should be a winning continuation, I think, here for black. So that was our analysis after bishop to d4. And the cool part is that actually this position has been played many times in chess history, 3 times. I see here 3 games in the database in sort of an international slash FIDE master level. So it was quite wild what they played. But as I said, here in the game, here Leela C0 played knight takes d4. And you see now, the good part about the move knight to d4 is when the bishop comes here, that you have still the opportunity to play the move c6. And this position has been also played in chess history. I see also 3 games in the database. There is an interesting game, Alan Pichot against Levon Aronian. Levon Aronian, for instance, won this game with the black pieces. So in this position, Levon found good defensive ideas. But as I said, still it was playable in top grandmaster level. So here after move c6, now Stockfish plays the only move, the only attacking move that you have to do in order to stay in the game. Maybe you can pause the video and try to see really this sick move by Stockfish 15. I couldn't see it. I would probably retreat with the bishop immediately somewhere, staying maybe active. But now Stockfish played really a sick move. Pause the video and try to see, as I said, again, maybe the best continuation. It's not so easy to see, but it's simply Stockfish style. But I'm sure many of you would consider it because you already know the grip that Stockfish includes many times the rook in a beautiful way by creating some rook lifts. And we know, especially, we love Stockfish rook lifts. I think I'm going to make a special video only about Stockfish rook lifts. So I'm going to show all of the Stockfish rook lifts that have been played here on my YouTube chess channel that I've analyzed. So rook to a3, of course, with some beautiful ideas to play rook to g3 and then create some madness. So let's see now what happens if you take out the bishop. This wasn't played in the game, but we want to know what is going to happen if you take out the bishop in the center. Then of course rook to g3 is going to happen, placing the rook where already the king is. Then now the king has to escape from this tactical mess on the g file. But now we have this stunner. This is the brutal move that Stockfish would probably play if Stockfish would play the position e5. You have to make now reaction. You have to take out now the pawn, and now this other rook comes into the game, creates of course a beautiful rook lift, the rook to e5, and there's not a good way how you should escape. Maybe bishop to c8, creating some at least defensive ideas. You're not allowing at least this move rook to h3, this check here. But now of course bishop to f6, queen to f6, and now rook to h5. You have to cover yourself with the queen, and now you lose the queen, and this is completely winning, I think, here for white. So really wild stuff. So that's why after move rook to a3, pardon me, Leela C0 didn't have time to take out the bishop on d5, had to play a little bit around, played now a very interesting defensive idea, rook to e8, because Leela realized that she could really be vulnerable here on the g file or on the h file. So that's why Leela C0 created here sort of a path in order to escape finally with the queen. So Leela is trying now to get the king on the queen side. So we have rook to g3 anyway by Stockfish announcing this beautiful tactical shot. We have king to f8 getting out of the mess, and now bishop to h6. We have king to e7, and now comes a new brutal sick tactic by Stockfish again. That's why, as I said, this was one of the best games again that I see in my life. I'm really happy when I can show you such a beautiful tactical game. Here after move king to e7, Stockfish plays an immortal tactic, bishop to f7, and the problem is now if you take king to f7, you get rook to g7. If you get on f8, then you get this windmill tactic. You see, you get rook to b7. You have to play like this. Then again rook to e3. Again this rook lift. this other rook will come into the game, so it's again game over here for Leela C0. So let's go back. After move rook to g7, you have to play king to e6, but now queen to d3 is going to happen. So now we play a queen lift, not a rook lift. We have sort of a new here expression for Stockfish. We have a beautiful queen lift with the idea to play queen to h3. Now maybe you can play c5, but let's see now. This is now the main idea. Queen to h3. You can play maybe king to e5, but now with f4 you're getting even checkmated. So really stunning tactics that Stockfish is preparing here. So after move bishop to f7, you see you cannot touch the bishop, you have to get out of this mess. So that's why Leela C0 played first rook to h8. We have now e5, opening now the center. Of course, we have d takes e5, rook to e5, and now king to d7. But look at this now, the king gets on the file where already the queen is. And the cool part here about the Stockfish attack is that the queen hasn't played so far in the game. Notice this, the queen didn't participate so far in the attack, but the queen has always sort of a potential activity, and now the queen is on the starting score, but it still has a potential activity. It still has sort of a tension all over the board. So that's why, look at this, the king comes on the same file where the queen is. So now here we have a beautiful check. Bishop to e6 is going to happen now, and look at this, you cannot take because of the tension here on the d file. So many things can be played now. Here in the continuation, king to c7 was played by Leela C0. If you play king to e7, then you get this one, bishop to h3, discovered attack. You have to play something like, I don't know, king to d6. But now look at this again, this potential activity by the queen is working. Queen to d1 is still active here, so rook to e6 is working. Now we play something like king to c7, but now bishop to f4 is coming into the game, so it's game over. You have to sacrifice the queen, and it's, I think, losing game for black for sure. So after move bishop to e6, so that's why Leela C0 escaped on the queen side as planned, but it's not working because again bishop to f4 with some discovered threats, of course, by the bishop. So that's why we have king to b8. At least Leela is saying, okay, I will maybe lose one piece, but at least I'm getting the king here towards the queen side. But of course, rook to d5 here played by Stockfish, and now we have a discovered check. But also here the queen is hanging. Here Leela C0 played king to a7, but finally rook takes d8, rook takes d8, and now bishop to h3. Here Stockfish stopped the attack, has now enough compensation, has now enough material, saying now it's time to slow down the pace, because it was a brutal attack from the beginning. So we're now in move 27. Still Stockfish didn't play with the queen, which is really impressive, we have to really say it. From move bishop to h3, knight to e4, we have a5. If you take, of course, then we first take out the bishop and then afterwards the knight. So that's why bishop to a5, rook to g7, attacking now the bishop here on the 7th rank, bishop to b6, and now bishop to e3, knight to e6, and here rook to d7, rook takes d7, and finally queen to d7. So you see how Stockfish connected files with diagonals, how Stockfish traded off the rooks, how Stockfish got out of this tactical mess on the d file was really impressive. Rook to d7, rook takes d7, queen to d7, and now in move 32 it was the first time when the queen played here by Stockfish 15. Really wild stuff. So rook to d8, we have bishop to e6, and now Stockfish played only one move with the queen, and then afterwards Stockfish sacrificed the queen. But look at this, what we have now, it's now completely winning endgame here for Stockfish, because after bishop to f3, f takes e3, okay, black has his fun here by creating this 3 versus 1 pawn majority, but these are passers, so it's still hard for black to make some kind of a pass pawn. On the other hand, white has already some pass pawns and will just simply push them. So c5, we have h4, king to b6, bishop to f5, knight to d6, bishop to g6, bishop to e4, bishop takes e4, knight to e4, and now of course Stockfish just pushed the pawn further. We have c4, now beautiful move by Stockfish, knight to d2. If you take, of course, look at this, you don't have time to catch up with the pawn, so it's game over here for black. So that's why after move knight to d2, Leela c0 played knight to d6, we have g4, b4, and now Stockfish simply pushed the pawn further, c3, b takes c3, b takes c3, and now knight to b3, king to c7, and now g6. Now Leela has to play, of course, this move, knight to f5. If you don't play that, then Stockfish will play h6, and then we'll have the opportunity to play g7. So let's play maybe one move, bad move, then of course h6. Look at this, then you don't have simply time, would simply push the pawn further and it's game over. So that's not possible here for Leela. So that's why, as we said, after move g6 you have to play knight to f5. It's at least temporarily blocking out the mobility of this pawn. So here in the continuation we have e4, kicking with the knight, knight to h6, king to f2. Now finally Stockfish is marching with the king. We have king to e3, knight to d4, king to f6, knight to f5. If you take, of course, knight to f5, then it's not good, because we have here e takes f5. You can maybe play sort of a blockade with your king, but now this king will take both of these pawns. If you take, of course, here this backward pawn, then you cannot catch up anymore with this advanced pawn here on g6. So it's again completely winning. So after move knight to f5, we have knight to g8, g7. We have here king to g5, and now h6. So again, this same motif sort of. If you play knight to h6, knight to h6, king to h6, and then again this pawn will be promoted. So after move h6, we have king to g6, and here after move king to d3, in this position Leela c0 resigned. So why did she resign? Because of course these pawns will be taken. We have still also this pawn, so nothing can be stopped here in this position by black. So really wild stuff. I'm not sure what to say. As I said, I have really some problems to explain sometimes these games, because they're so wild, they're so tactically rich, they're so brutal, but they're of course beautiful, and I really love this game. Especially the new games by Stockfish 15 are really wilder. Stockfish 15 is out, I think, over 2 months or something, so the starting games were really okay, they were also cool, but now the latest Stockfish games are really mortal, are so brutal, with the mortal tactical shots. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed the game. I really enjoyed it a lot. If you want to see more sick attack like this, check out my commented chess games played by computer series, with some more games played by Alpha Zero, Leela Zero, Stockfish, and many more. And if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and what to say, chess is the best, of course.